What you are about to hear is a work of fiction. The people, places, and events depicted in this story are products of the author's imagination or used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual individuals, living or deceased, or to real situations is purely coincidental. These stories may explore themes of crime, injustice, and human suffering. While fictional, they reflect real emotions and difficult truths that some may find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised.
These aren't receipts, Sophia. These are forgeries. Every single one of them. You've been signing your own name to fake documents for 2 years. Papers scattered across the hardwood floor like fallen leaves, each one a piece of evidence in a web of deception that had taken months to unravel. Sophia Morrison stood frozen, her hands trembling as she stared at the documents that bore her signature but contained lies she'd never written. But I remember buying those things. I remember. Her voice trailed off, confusion clouding her dark eyes as the truth began to crystallize in her mind, like paint mixing on a palette, creating something entirely different from what she'd expected. To understand how Sophia Morrison discovered her best friend had weaponized her memory issues against her, we need to go back 6 months, to a time when trust felt as natural as breathing and betrayal seemed impossible. Before we go on, consider subscribing to the channel to be notified as new stories are published. Please let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to know just how far our stories reach. 6 months earlier, Sophia stood before her latest canvas in the converted loft studio that had been her sanctuary for over a decade. Sunlight streamed through the industrial windows, illuminating swirls of cerulean blue and burnt umber that seemed to dance across the surface. At 45, Sophia had built a reputation as one of the city's most promising contemporary artists, her landscapes and abstract pieces capturing something ineffable about the human experience of place and memory. The studio, located in the Arts District downtown, bore the beautiful chaos of a working artist's space. Canvases in various stages of completion lined the brick walls, some mere sketches in charcoal, others richly layered with months of careful work. Paint tubes cluttered every surface, their caps missing, contents hardened or squeezed into rainbow puddles on glass palettes. The scent of turpentine and linseed oil permeated everything, a perfume that Sophia had come to associate with home. But life had changed dramatically 2 years ago, when a car accident on a rainy Tuesday morning altered everything. The head injury she'd sustained hadn't taken her ability to paint, thank God for small mercies, but it had stolen something equally precious, her short-term memory. The doctors called it post-traumatic amnesia, with ongoing cognitive effects, a clinical term that couldn't capture the daily reality of living with a mind that worked like a sieve, holding on to some things while letting others slip through without warning. Sophia had adapted with the determination of someone who refused to let circumstances define her. Detailed journals filled shelf after shelf, their pages covered in her careful handwriting. Appointments, conversations, grocery lists, fragments of dreams that might become paintings. Her phone buzzed constantly with reminders she'd set for herself: take medication, eat lunch, call the gallery, pick up dry cleaning. Sticky notes formed a paper constellation across her bathroom mirror, kitchen cabinets, and easel, each one a breadcrumb leading her through the maze of daily life. When she painted, though, something magical happened. The muscle memory kicked in, her hands knowing exactly how much pressure to apply, which colors would sing together, how to layer texture and light until the canvas told its story. In those moments, she felt completely herself again, as if the accident had never happened. "Knock, knock! Hope you're decent in there?" Natalie Blackwood's voice carried up the stairs, accompanied by the familiar click of designer heels on wooden steps. Sophia smiled, setting down her brush. Natalie had been her closest friend for 15 years, but their relationship had deepened into something like sisterhood since the accident. Where others had gradually faded from Sophia's life, overwhelmed by her condition or unsure how to help, Natalie had stepped forward with unwavering dedication. "Come on up!" Sophia called, wiping paint from her hands with a rag that had seen better days. Natalie appeared in the doorway, perfectly put together as always in a cream-colored blazer and dark jeans, her auburn hair caught in an elegant twist. At 43, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had never doubted her place in the world. She held 2 cups of coffee and a small paper bag that smelled like cinnamon. "Thought you might need fuel," Natalie said, setting the coffee on a clean spot on Sophia's work table. "And I brought those scones you love from the bakery on 5th Street. "You're an angel," Sophia said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "I've been painting since sunrise and completely forgot about breakfast." "That's what I'm here for," Natalie replied, her eyes already scanning the studio with the practiced efficiency of someone managing a business. "How's the new piece coming along?" Sophia gestured toward the canvas she'd been working on, a sweeping landscape that seemed to capture the moment between sunset and full darkness, when the world balanced on the edge of transformation. "I think it's almost ready. James wants to include it in the autumn show." James Patterson had been Sophia's gallery owner for 15 years, representing her work with genuine enthusiasm and treating her like family rather than just another artist in his stable. He'd been incredibly supportive since her accident, adjusting payment schedules and exhibition timelines to accommodate her new reality. "It's beautiful," Natalie said, though Sophia noticed she spent only a moment actually looking at the painting before moving on to shuffle through papers on the desk. "Speaking of James, we need to talk about the quarterly taxes. I've been going through your receipts, and there are some things we should discuss." Sophia felt the familiar flutter of anxiety that accompanied financial conversations. Numbers had always been challenging for her, even before the accident, and now they seemed to slip through her mind like water. Thank goodness for Natalie's help with the business side of her art career. "Is everything okay?" Sophia asked, sipping her coffee. Natalie had added just the right amount of cream, the way she'd been doing it for months. "Of course, honey. You know I'd never let anything bad happen to you," Natalie said, her voice carrying that gentle tone she'd developed since becoming Sophia's informal caregiver. "It's just that there are some expenses I want to make sure you remember. You've been doing so well lately, but I know sometimes the little things slip through the cracks." Sophia nodded, settling into the worn leather chair beside her easel. This had become their routine. Natalie would arrive with coffee and pastries. They'd discuss Sophia's schedule and business matters, and then Natalie would help organize whatever chaos had accumulated since her last visit. "I found receipts for some online shopping," Natalie continued, pulling out a folder. "Jewelry, some expensive skincare products, a few pieces for your wardrobe. Do you remember making these purchases?" Sophia frowned, accepting the papers. The receipts were clearly in her handwriting, but she couldn't recall buying any of the items listed. A pearl necklace for $300, an anti-aging serum that cost more than her monthly grocery budget, a silk dress from a boutique she'd never heard of. These don't seem like things I would buy," Sophia said slowly, studying her own signature at the bottom of each receipt. "You were having one of your difficult weeks," Natalie explained gently. "Remember when you called me crying because you'd gotten lost coming home from the grocery store? You'd been feeling really frustrated about your condition, and I think maybe you were trying to cheer yourself up with some retail therapy." The explanation made sense, even though Sophia couldn't remember the shopping spree. She definitely remembered that awful afternoon when familiar streets had suddenly seemed foreign, when she'd sat in her car in a parking lot for 20 minutes, trying to remember how to get home. The memory gaps were the worst part of her condition, not just forgetting where she'd put her keys, but losing entire experiences, whole conversations vanishing as if they'd never happened. "The important thing," Natalie continued, "is that you're taking better care of yourself now. I've been so proud of how you've been managing your medications and keeping up with your art. James told me yesterday that your latest pieces are some of the strongest work you've ever done." Sophia felt a warm glow at the praise. It was true that her recent paintings felt different, more intense somehow, as if her altered brain chemistry had unlocked new ways of seeing color and form. Several collectors had expressed interest in her work, and James had mentioned the possibility of a solo exhibition next spring. I should probably get these receipts organized for tax purposes, Sophia said, setting the papers aside. Though I'm not sure where the jewelry and things ended up. I can't find them anywhere. Oh, you donated most of it, Natalie said quickly. Remember? You went through that phase where you wanted to simplify your life, get rid of material possessions that weren't essential. I helped you drop everything off at that women's shelter downtown. You were so proud of yourself for being generous. Sophia wished she could remember such a meaningful gesture, but the donation sounded like something she would do. Before the accident, she'd been actively involved with several charities, particularly those supporting artists and women in crisis. That sounds right, Sophia agreed, though something nagged at her. A small voice in the back of her mind wondered why she would buy expensive jewelry only to give it away immediately, but she pushed the doubt aside. Her thought patterns had been unreliable since the accident. It made sense that her decision-making might be inconsistent, too. Natalie spent the next hour helping Sophia organize her studio space, sorting through the controlled chaos of an active artist's workspace. She had a gift for creating order without disrupting Sophia's creative process, understanding which seemingly random arrangements actually served important purposes. Your medication reminder went off, Natalie noted, checking her watch. Should I get your pills? Please, Sophia said, not looking up from the canvas she'd returned to working on. They're in the bathroom medicine cabinet. Natalie disappeared into the small bathroom that adjoined the studio, returning with a small plastic organizer filled with various medications. Sophia's daily pharmaceutical routine had become complex since the accident. Something for memory support, others for the headaches that still plagued her, supplements her neurologist had recommended. Here's your afternoon dose, Natalie said, shaking 2 pills into her palm. And I brought you that herbal tea blend my naturopath recommended. It's supposed to help with cognitive function and stress. Sophia accepted the pills and the steaming cup of tea that Natalie produced from her seemingly bottomless handbag. The tea had a pleasant, earthy flavor, with hints of ginseng and something floral she couldn't identify. Natalie had been bringing it for months, and Sophia had to admit she'd been feeling more relaxed lately, even if her memory hadn't dramatically improved. You're spoiling me, Sophia said, settling back with the warm cup. Someone has to take care of you, Natalie replied, and there was something in her tone that Sophia couldn't quite interpret. Affection, certainly, but also something else. Possession, maybe? But that was silly. Natalie was just being protective, the way good friends should be. As the afternoon wore on, Sophia found herself growing drowsy, despite the coffee she'd consumed earlier. It happened sometimes. The medications could make her tired, especially when combined with the intense focus that painting required. She'd learned not to fight it, instead allowing herself to rest when her body demanded it. I think I need a nap, she said, setting down her brush. Would you mind locking up when you leave? Of course, honey, Natalie said, already moving to cover Sophia's palette and clean her brushes with practiced efficiency. You rest. I'll finish organizing these papers and make sure everything's secure. Sophia made her way to the small bedroom she'd created in the back corner of the loft, separated from the main studio by a folding screen decorated with one of her early paintings. As she settled into bed, she could hear Natalie moving around the studio, the soft sounds of someone who knew the space well. She drifted off thinking about the painting she'd been working on, the way the light seemed to emerge from within the canvas rather than being applied to its surface. In her dreams, she walked through landscapes that shifted and changed with each step, colors bleeding into each other like watercolors in rain. When Sophia woke 3 hours later, the studio was quiet and Natalie was gone. A note on the kitchen counter thanked her for the afternoon and reminded her about dinner plans for the following week. Everything was tidy, more organized than it had been in days. But as Sophia moved through her evening routine, she noticed something that made her pause. The wall where she'd been storing her most recent completed works looked strangely empty. 3 paintings that she clearly remembered finishing in the past month were missing, leaving rectangular patches of unfaded paint on the brick wall. She checked her journal, reading her own handwriting from earlier in the week. Finished morning fog over bridge, 24, X, 36. Ready for James to review. But the painting was nowhere to be found. Confused, Sophia called Natalie. "Oh, those pieces," Natalie said when Sophia described the missing paintings. "You asked me to take them to storage last week. You were having one of your anxious episodes and said the studio felt too cluttered. Don't you remember? We rented a storage unit together, and you insisted on clearing out some of the completed work to make space for new projects." Sophia didn't remember any of this, but the explanation sounded reasonable. She'd been feeling overwhelmed lately by the sheer volume of work in the studio. And she definitely had anxious episodes where familiar spaces could suddenly feel oppressive and chaotic. "I'm sorry," Sophia said. "I should have written it down. Which storage place did we use?" "That big facility on the east side of town," Natalie replied. "Don't worry about it, honey. I have the key and all the paperwork. We can visit it anytime you want to retrieve pieces for exhibitions or sales." After hanging up, Sophia sat in her kitchen, sipping leftover tea and trying to piece together the week's events. The memory gaps were frustrating, but at least she had Natalie to help fill in the blanks. She made a note in her journal about the storage unit and resolved to be more careful about documenting important decisions. Over the following weeks, the pattern continued. Sophia would paint with focused intensity, creating works that felt both familiar and surprising, as if they were emerging from some deeper part of herself that the accident hadn't touched. But then pieces would disappear, always with reasonable explanations from Natalie. Donated to charity auctions, moved to storage, lent to other artists for inspiration. Her bank account, too, seemed to fluctuate in ways she couldn't quite track. Large deposits from painting sales would appear, only to disappear just as quickly through ATM withdrawals and online transfers that Natalie assured her were legitimate expenses. Art supplies, studio rent, medical bills, insurance payments. "You've been so productive lately," Natalie said during one of their regular coffee meetings at the cafe downstairs from Sophia's studio. "James is thrilled with your output. He's already talking about expanding your presence in the gallery." Sophia stirred her latte, watching the foam swirl into patterns that reminded her of cloud formations. "I feel productive," she said. "It's strange. Sometimes I feel like the accident freed something in my brain, like I'm accessing parts of my creativity that were blocked before." "That's beautiful, Sophia. You're turning trauma into art, which is what the greatest artists have always done." Natalie reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "I'm so proud of how you've adapted. Not everyone would have your strength." The words were comforting, but Sophia noticed that Natalie seemed more interested in her phone than in the conversation. She was always checking messages, always managing something behind the scenes. Sophia appreciated the help, but sometimes she felt like a child being managed rather than an adult being supported. "I was thinking," Sophia said, "maybe I should start handling more of my own business affairs again. I don't want to burden you with so much responsibility." Natalie's head snapped up from her phone, her expression shifting so quickly that Sophia almost missed it. For just a moment she looked angry, frightened. But then the familiar caring smile returned. "Oh, honey, you're not a burden. You know I love helping you, and honestly, I worry about you taking on too much stress. Your condition is manageable now, but we don't want to risk a setback." Natalie's voice carried that gentle, concerned tone that always made Sophia feel both cared for and somehow diminished. "I suppose you're right," Sophia said, though part of her rebelled against the implication that she couldn't handle her own affairs. "Besides," Natalie continued, "you're finally in a good rhythm with your art. Why disrupt that by worrying about paperwork and taxes and all those tedious details? That's what friends are for." As they walked back to the studio, Sophia found herself studying Natalie's profile. Her friend had always been well-dressed, but lately she seemed to be wearing more expensive clothes, carrying designer handbags, sporting jewelry that caught the light in ways that suggested real gold and genuine stones. When Sophia commented on a particularly beautiful bracelet, Natalie laughed it off as a lucky find at a consignment shop. But doubt had taken root in Sophia's mind, growing slowly like a vine that would eventually crack the foundation of everything she thought she knew about trust, friendship, and the people who claimed to love her most. The doubt became impossible to ignore 3 weeks later when James Patterson called with a question that changed everything. "Sophia, I'm a bit confused about something," James said, his usually warm voice carrying an edge of concern. "I've had several collectors asking about pieces they commissioned from you, paintings they paid deposits for months ago. But when I check our records, there's no documentation of these sales. Do you remember working with clients directly, outside of gallery sales?" Sophia felt ice form in her stomach. "No, James. All my sales go through you. That's always been our arrangement." "That's what I thought," James said carefully, "but I have 3 different people claiming they bought original works directly from you. They have receipts with your signature, bank records showing payments made to accounts in your name. 2 of them are quite upset because they never received their paintings." After James hung up, Sophia sat in her studio staring at the canvas she'd been working on, but the colors seemed muted now, drained of their earlier vitality. Something was very wrong, and for the first time since her accident, she began to wonder if her memory problems were being used against her. That evening, she called her sister Victoria for the first time in 10 years. The call went straight to voicemail, and Sophia's voice shook as she left a message. "Victoria, it's Sophia. I know we haven't talked since everything with Mom and Dad's estate, but I think I might be in trouble, and I don't know who else to trust. Could you please call me back?" She hung up feeling both relieved and terrified. Victoria might still hate her for the bitter fight that had driven them apart after their parents' death, but she was also the only person Sophia could think of who had absolutely no reason to take advantage of her condition. 3 days later, Victoria Morrison stood on Sophia's doorstep looking like an older, more serious version of her twin sister. Where Sophia's dark hair fell in artistic waves around her shoulders, Victoria's was pulled back in a neat bun that spoke of board meetings and business lunches. Her gray suit and practical shoes suggested someone who had built a successful life far from the chaos of creative pursuits. "You look terrible," Victoria said without preamble, studying Sophia's face with eyes that missed nothing. "Hello to you too," Sophia replied, but she was smiling despite herself. Victoria had always been bluntly honest, a trait that had both frustrated and comforted Sophia throughout their childhood. Victoria stepped into the studio and whistled low under her breath. "This place is incredible, Sophia. I had no idea your work had evolved so much." For a moment, the sisters simply stood together, absorbing the weight of a decade's separation. They had been identical twins until life began carving different paths across their faces. Sophia marked by artistic passion and recent trauma, Victoria shaped by corporate success and carefully controlled emotion. "I got some strange emails," Victoria said finally. "Messages supposedly from you, begging for money and saying horrible things about me. But the tone was all wrong, and when I called your old number, it was disconnected." Sophia's blood chilled. "I never sent you any emails. I've been wanting to contact you for years, but I never worked up the courage, and I would never ask you for money." "I know," Victoria said quietly. "That's why I'm here." Over the next several hours, Sophia told her sister everything. The accident, the memory problems, Natalie's increasing involvement in her life, the missing paintings, the financial irregularities. Victoria listened with the focused attention of someone accustomed to solving complex problems, occasionally asking pointed questions that made Sophia realize how many details she'd accepted without question. "Show me your bank statements," Victoria said when Sophia finished her story. The statements revealed a troubling pattern. Large deposits from art sales would appear, often for amounts much higher than Sophia remembered her paintings selling for. But within days, the money would vanish through ATM withdrawals, online transfers, and payments to companies Sophia didn't recognize. These ATM withdrawals, Victoria said, pointing to a series of transactions. They're all from the same machine, always in the evening, always for the maximum daily limit. Do you remember making these withdrawals? Sophia shook her head. I usually avoid ATMs because the number pads confuse me. I almost always write checks or use my debit card for specific purchases. Victoria's expression grew darker as she reviewed more statements. Sophia, you've withdrawn over $40,000 in cash in the past 6 months. Does that seem possible to you? 40,000? Sophia felt sick. That's more than I spend in a year on everything. And look at these online transfers, Victoria continued, her finger tracing a line of transactions. Monthly payments of $1,500 to something called Artistic Wellness Services. Do you know what that is? I've never heard of it, Sophia said. Victoria pulled out her laptop and began searching. Within minutes, her face had gone pale. Sophia, this company doesn't exist. The business registration was filed 6 months ago with a PO. Box address. There's no website, no public information, nothing. The sisters stared at each other across the kitchen table, the implications settling between them like smoke from a fire that had been burning unseen for months. Someone's been stealing from you, Victoria said flatly. The question is who has access to your accounts, your signatures, your personal information. As if summoned by their conversation, Sophia heard the familiar sound of heels on the stairs outside. Natalie's voice carried up, calling out her usual greeting. That's Natalie, Sophia whispered, and Victoria's eyes sharpened. Don't let on that anything's wrong, Victoria said quietly. I want to observe her before we tip our hand. Natalie appeared in the doorway, her smile freezing when she saw Victoria. For just a moment, her careful composure slipped, revealing something calculating and cold beneath the surface. Oh, Natalie said, recovering quickly. You must be Victoria. Sophia mentioned she had a sister, but I thought you lived out of state. I do, Victoria replied evenly. I came for a visit when I got some concerning messages. Messages? Natalie's voice carried a note of carefully modulated concern. Is everything all right? Victoria smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Just some strange emails supposedly from Sophia, probably spam or someone using her name. You know how it is with identity theft these days. How awful, Natalie said, moving to put a protective arm around Sophia's shoulders. People have no shame about taking advantage of vulnerable individuals. Sophia's been through so much with her condition, it makes me furious to think of scammers targeting her. Sophia felt Victoria's gaze boring into the side of her head and wondered what her sister was seeing that she had missed. Well, Natalie continued, I should let you two catch up. I just wanted to drop off Sophia's afternoon tea and make sure she'd taken her medications. She produced the familiar thermos and small pill organizer, setting them on the counter with practiced efficiency. Sophia reached for the tea automatically, but Victoria's hand closed over her wrist. Actually, Victoria said, we were just about to go out for coffee. Maybe save the tea for later? Natalie's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course, but Sophia, you shouldn't skip your medications. Your doctor was very specific about maintaining a consistent schedule. I'll make sure she takes them, Victoria said firmly. After Natalie left, the sisters sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Victoria spoke. Don't drink that tea. What? Sophia looked at the innocent-looking thermos. Why not? Because your pupils are dilated every time she visits, and your speech gets slightly slurred about 20 minutes after you drink whatever she brings you. I noticed it in the photos on your social media. The timing is always the same. Victoria opened the thermos and sniffed the contents. This doesn't smell like any herbal tea I've ever encountered. It smells medicinal. You think she's drugging me? The idea seemed impossible, even as pieces began clicking into place in Sophia's mind. I think someone with access to your house, your bank accounts, your business affairs, and your daily routine has been systematically stealing from you while making you doubt your own mental capacity. Victoria's voice was hard as steel. And I think we need to find out exactly what's in this tea. The next morning, while Natalie thought Victoria had returned to Seattle, the sisters drove to a private laboratory downtown. Victoria had called in a favor from a former colleague who specialized in toxicology, and within hours they had their answer. The tea contained a cocktail of mild sedatives and cognitive inhibitors, drugs that would cause confusion, memory problems, and suggestibility without creating obvious symptoms of poisoning. Someone had been deliberately impairing Sophia's mental faculties for months. These substances wouldn't kill you, the technician explained, but they would severely impact short-term memory formation and decision-making capacity. Long-term use could cause significant cognitive damage. Victoria's face was white with fury. How long has she been taking this? Based on the concentration levels, I'd estimate daily consumption for at least 6 months, possibly longer. Sophia felt the world tilt around her. For months, she'd been blaming her accident for cognitive problems that were actually being caused by someone she trusted. Someone who claimed to love her had been slowly poisoning her while systematically looting her life's work. "We need proof," Victoria said as they sat in the car outside the lab. "We need documentation of what she's doing before we can involve the police." "The storage unit," Sophia said suddenly. "She said she put my paintings in storage, but I've never seen it. What if they're not in storage at all?" Victoria's eyes lit up. What if she's selling them privately and keeping the money? They spent the afternoon creating a plan that felt both terrifying and liberating. Victoria would pretend to leave town while actually staying at a nearby hotel. Sophia would stop taking any medications or tea that Natalie provided, allowing her mind to clear while pretending everything was normal. They would install hidden cameras in the studio and document everything Natalie did when she thought she was unobserved. The first few days were challenging. Sophia's head felt clearer than it had in months, but she had to act confused and compliant when Natalie visited. It was agonizing to pretend to drink the drugged tea, to act grateful for care that was actually abuse, to smile at someone who had been systematically destroying her life. But the cameras captured everything. Natalie crushing pills into Sophia's tea when she thought no one was watching, phone conversations with art dealers, arranging sales of paintings she had no right to sell, rifling through Sophia's files, looking for financial documents and personal information. On the 4th day of surveillance, Victoria discovered the storage unit, not through any rental agreement they could find, but by following Natalie to a warehouse district across town. The unit was rented under Natalie's name, and it contained dozens of Sophia's paintings, carefully organized and labeled with price tags that made Victoria's breath catch in her throat. "Some of these pieces are worth $30,000 each," Victoria whispered as they crouched outside the storage facility, documenting everything with a long lens camera. "She's been stockpiling your work like it's gold." But the final piece of evidence came when they discovered Natalie's second business, a private gallery operating under a different name, selling original works by emerging artists to collectors who asked no questions about provenance. The gallery's website featured several of Sophia's pieces, described as works by a reclusive artist who prefers anonymity. "She's created an entire shadow business around your work," Victoria said, scrolling through the gallery's online catalog. "She's been selling your paintings for full market value while telling you they were donated to charity or stored away." The paperwork they found in Natalie's car told the rest of the story. Forged receipts for purchases Sophia had never made, practice sheets where Natalie had been copying Sophia's signature, and most damning of all, a power of attorney document that Sophia had apparently signed during one of her drugged episodes. According to this, Victoria said, holding up the legal document, "She has complete control over your finances and medical decisions. She could have you committed to a care facility any time she wanted." Sophia stared at her own signature on the document, written in her hand but created during a moment she couldn't remember. She was planning to take everything. She was planning to take everything and make it look like you were incompetent to manage your own affairs. Victoria corrected. The perfect crime, because who would believe that someone with documented memory problems was being systematically abused? They decided the confrontation needed to happen during one of Natalie's regular visits, when she would be caught in the act of administering the drugged tea. Victoria would document everything from a hidden position, while Sophia pretended to go along with signing new documents that Natalie had been pushing for weeks, papers that would give her even more control over Sophia's assets. The morning of the sting operation, Sophia called Natalie with excitement she didn't have to fake. "I've had the most incredible breakthrough," she said, pitching her voice higher than usual, the way it sounded when she was having one of her episodes. "I've been inspired to create my masterpiece, something that could be worth $100,000 or more. But I need help organizing the sale, and I think we should make it official with legal paperwork." Natalie's interest was immediate and intense. "That sounds wonderful, honey. What kind of paperwork are you thinking about?" "I want to sign something that makes sure you'll always be taken care of for everything you've done for me. Maybe something that gives you official rights to handle all my business affairs?" There was a pause, and Sophia could practically hear Natalie's greed calculating possibilities. "That's very generous, Sophia. I know exactly what kind of documents we'd need. I can bring them today, along with a notary to make everything legal." "Perfect," Sophia said, "and maybe you could bring some of that special tea? I always think more clearly after I drink it." When Natalie arrived that afternoon, she was accompanied by a notary public and carried a briefcase full of legal documents. She'd also brought the largest thermos of tea Sophia had ever seen, along with an extra dose of medications to help with the stress of making important decisions. Victoria watched from her hidden position as Natalie prepared the tea with extra care, crushing 3 pills instead of her usual 2 and stirring the mixture until it dissolved completely. The hidden cameras captured every moment, as Natalie then coached Sophia through signing documents that would have given her complete control over every aspect of Sophia's life and work. "This is just a formality," Natalie said, as Sophia lifted the cup of tea to her lips. "But it will make sure that no one can ever take advantage of you or question your decisions. I'll always be here to protect you." Sophia pretended to drink deeply, feeling the bitter liquid coat her mouth, before she discreetly spit it into a tissue when Natalie turned to arrange the papers. Her hands shook slightly as she reached for the first document, but whether from fear or fury, she couldn't tell. "These papers will transfer ownership of your art collection to a trust that I'll manage," Natalie explained, guiding Sophia's hand toward the signature line. "It's for your own protection, in case your condition worsens." "That makes sense," Sophia said, playing the role of a confused woman, grateful for guidance. "You always know what's best for me." As Sophia's pen touched the paper, Victoria burst through the door with police officers and James Patterson right behind her. "Stop right there!" Victoria shouted. "Those aren't legal documents, they're fraud instruments, and this woman has been poisoning my sister for months." The scene that followed would replay in Sophia's memory for years afterward. Natalie's careful mask slipping away to reveal the calculating predator beneath. The notary backing away in shock, claiming he'd been told this was a routine estate planning session. Natalie's desperate attempt to grab the drugged tea and destroy the evidence, only to have it preserved by officers who'd been briefed on exactly what to look for. "These aren't receipts, Sophia. These are forgeries. Every single one of them. You've been signing your own name to fake documents for 2 years." Papers scattered across the hardwood floor as Victoria confronted Natalie with evidence that had taken weeks to compile, bank records showing fraudulent transactions. Photos of Sophia's paintings in Natalie's storage unit, chemical analysis of the drugged tea. Recordings of phone conversations where Natalie arranged illegal sales of artwork she didn't own. "But I remember buying those things. I remember." Sophia's voice trailed off as she stared at receipts that bore her signature but detailed purchases she'd never made. "No, you don't remember," Victoria said firmly, "because those purchases never happened." She's been forging receipts to cover up her theft, making you think you were spending money frivolously so you wouldn't question where it was really going. Natalie's composure finally shattered completely. "You don't understand." She screamed at Victoria. "I was caring for her. Do you have any idea how much work it takes to manage someone like Sophia? I deserved compensation." Compensation? James Patterson stepped forward, his usually gentle demeanor replaced by cold anger. "You stole over $800,000 worth of artwork and poisoned a woman who trusted you with her life. That's not caregiving, that's systematic abuse." The police officer stepped forward with handcuffs as Natalie's face cycled through desperate emotions. "It started small," she said, her voice breaking. "I just took one painting to pay off some gambling debts, but Sophia never even noticed it was gone. And I thought maybe just one more." "One more turned into dozens," Victoria said coldly. "You created an entire criminal enterprise around my sister's trust and vulnerability." "But she was so grateful," Natalie protested as the handcuffs clicked into place. "She thanked me for taking care of her. She signed everything willingly." "She signed documents while you were drugging her?" Sophia said, her voice stronger now than it had been in months. "You made me doubt my own mind, so I'd be grateful for your help. You turned my recovery into your opportunity." As they led Natalie away, she turned back one last time. "You'll never manage without me, Sophia. You can't even remember to eat lunch." "She'll manage just fine," Victoria said firmly. "She's stronger than you ever gave her credit for." The aftermath moved with surprising speed once the evidence was compiled. The district attorney's office built their case around the documented fraud, the chemical evidence of poisoning, and the clear pattern of financial exploitation. Natalie Blackwood was charged with elder abuse, fraud, forgery, theft, and poisoning, charges that carried a potential sentence of 15 to 20 years in prison. The recovery of Sophia's stolen artwork became a community effort. James Patterson worked with law enforcement to track down pieces that had been sold through Natalie's shadow gallery, while other local artists and collectors came forward with information about suspicious sales they'd witnessed. The storage unit yielded 43 paintings worth over $800,000, while another dozen pieces were recovered from private collectors who'd unknowingly purchased stolen work. The hardest part, James explained to Sophia as they walked through the recovered collection, is that some of these are the strongest pieces you've ever created. She was stealing your best work, your most emotionally powerful paintings. Sophia stood before a canvas she'd painted during one of her supposedly confused periods, a swirling abstract that captured the feeling of drowning in uncertainty while reaching for something solid and real. "I painted this during one of my worst weeks," she said softly, "when I thought I was losing my mind completely. But look at it, there's nothing confused about this work. It's expressing exactly what I was feeling." Victoria joined them, carrying a folder of financial documents. "The bank has agreed to reverse all the fraudulent transactions they can verify. Your savings account should be restored to approximately what it was before Natalie's theft began, and the insurance company is covering the cost of the medical evaluations you'll need." Those medical evaluations revealed the true extent of Natalie's crime. Without the daily dose of cognitive inhibitors, Sophia's mental clarity improved dramatically within weeks. Her memory problems didn't disappear entirely. The original head injury had caused lasting changes, but they became manageable in ways they hadn't been for 2 years. The substances she was giving you were specifically chosen to mimic and exaggerate symptoms of cognitive decline. Dr. Martinez explained during one of Sophia's follow-up appointments. She was essentially giving you a chemically induced form of dementia while pretending to care for you. "How much damage did she do?" Sophia asked, afraid of the answer. "Surprisingly little permanent damage," the doctor said with a reassuring smile. "The human brain is remarkably resilient. With proper nutrition, exercise, and the cognitive rehabilitation we're starting, you should recover most of your pre-poisoning function within 6 months." The legal proceedings took nearly a year, during which Sophia threw herself into her art with renewed passion. The paintings she created during this period were unlike anything she'd done before. Raw, powerful works that dealt directly with themes of betrayal, recovery, and the complicated nature of trust. Victoria had extended her stay indefinitely, taking a leave of absence from her job in Seattle to help Sophia rebuild her life and business. The sisters worked together to establish proper safeguards and systems, but more importantly, they began healing the relationship that had been broken for so long. "I'm sorry I wasn't here when you needed me," Victoria said one evening as they sat in the studio, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the sunset paint the walls in shades of gold and amber. "You're here now," Sophia replied, and honestly, I don't think I would have believed what was happening if it had been anyone else telling me. Natalie was so good at making me doubt myself. "That's what made her dangerous," Victoria said. "She understood exactly how to use your condition against you. But she underestimated your strength and your talent. Even while she was poisoning you, you were creating incredible art." The trial itself was almost anticlimactic. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Natalie's lawyers negotiated a plea agreement that sentenced her to 12 years in prison and required her to pay full restitution. During her sentencing hearing, she made one final attempt to justify her actions. "Your Honor," she said, addressing the judge while pointedly not looking at Sophia, "I genuinely cared for the defendant. I spent countless hours helping her, managing her affairs, making sure she was safe. The money I took was compensation for services that went far beyond normal friendship." Judge Hamilton's response was swift and unforgiving. "Miss Blackwood, you poisoned a vulnerable woman for 2 years while systematically stealing her life's work. You exploited a disability to commit fraud on a massive scale. The court finds your attempts at justification particularly disturbing because they show a complete lack of remorse or understanding of the severity of your crimes." When Sophia was given the opportunity to address the court, she stood with Victoria beside her and spoke directly to Natalie for the first time since the arrest. "You didn't just steal my paintings," she said, her voice clear and strong. "You stole 2 years of my recovery. You made me believe I was losing my mind when I was actually fighting to keep it. You turned my gratitude into a weapon against me. But what you never understood is that my art comes from something deeper than memory or cognitive function. It comes from a part of me that you couldn't touch, no matter how many drugs you gave me." Natalie finally looked at her then, and Sophia saw something in her former friend's eyes that might have been genuine regret. But it was too late for apologies, too late for explanations that might make sense of the senseless. 6 months after the trial ended, James Patterson organized an exhibition that he called Recovered: The Lost Works of Sophia Morrison. The show featured not only the stolen paintings that had been returned, but also the powerful new series Sophia had created during her recovery period. The centerpiece of the exhibition was a large canvas titled Clarity, a painting that seemed to capture the moment when fog lifts from a landscape, revealing details that had always been there but were hidden from view. Standing before it on opening night, surrounded by friends and collectors and fellow artists who had supported her through the ordeal, Sophia felt something she hadn't experienced in years: complete trust in her own perceptions. "This painting," she told a reporter who was covering the exhibition, "represents what it feels like to have your mind returned to you. For 2 years, I thought I was seeing the world through broken glass, but it turns out the glass was fine. Someone else was just holding a filter in front of it." The exhibition was a tremendous success, both artistically and financially. Several pieces sold for record amounts, and Sophia found herself in the enviable position of having more commissions than she could handle. But more important than the money was the response from other artists and caregivers who came forward with their own stories. "You gave me the courage to question my own situation," wrote one elderly painter whose adult son had been managing her finances. "I realized that my confusion about money always seemed to happen right after he visited." Another letter came from a woman whose husband had been controlling her medication after a stroke. "Reading about your case made me realize that being dependent doesn't mean being helpless. I asked my doctor to review my prescriptions, and it turns out I'd been taking twice the recommended dose of sedatives for months. Victoria framed these letters and hung them in Sophia's studio, a reminder that speaking out about abuse and exploitation could create ripples of protection and awareness far beyond their original intent. A year after Natalie's sentencing, the sisters had settled into a new normal. Victoria had decided to stay permanently, using her business skills to help Sophia navigate the art world while carefully maintaining boundaries that preserved Sophia's autonomy and independence. "I'm not here to manage you," Victoria said during one of their regular check-ins. "I'm here to help you manage things yourself. There's a big difference." Sophia had also begun working with a therapist who specialized in trauma, recovery, learning to distinguish between realistic concerns about her cognitive limitations and the learned helplessness that Natalie's abuse had created. "Trusting people again doesn't mean trusting everyone," Dr. Roberts explained. "It means learning to trust your own judgment about who deserves trust and under what circumstances." The studio had been transformed as well. Where once it had felt chaotic and overwhelming, it now felt purposefully creative. Sophia had developed new systems for organization that worked with her brain rather than against it. And she'd learned to see her memory challenges as just another aspect of her creative process, rather than a fundamental flaw. One evening, as autumn light slanted through the tall windows and painted everything in shades of amber and gold, Sophia stood before her easel working on a new piece. The painting showed two women, sisters, standing together before a sunrise, their faces turned toward light that seemed to emerge from within the canvas itself. Victoria looked up from the business correspondence she was handling at the desk across the room. "What are you calling this one?" Sophia smiled, adding a touch of crimson to the sky that made the whole composition sing. "I'm thinking second chances. Or maybe what we recovered." "Both of those work," Victoria said, "though personally I like what we built together." As if summoned by their conversation, Sophia's phone buzzed with a text from James. The message contained a photo from another artist's opening across town, a gallery wall displaying a small placard that read, "This exhibition is dedicated to Sophia Morrison, whose courage in speaking out about artistic exploitation has helped protect countless creators from similar abuse." Sophia showed the photo to Victoria, who grinned and raised her coffee cup in a mock toast. "To unexpected consequences," she said. "To speaking truth," Sophia replied, touching her brush to the canvas one more time, "even when it's difficult." Outside, the city was settling into evening, lights beginning to twinkle in windows and street lamps flickering to life. But inside the studio, two sisters worked together in comfortable silence, creating something beautiful from materials that had once seemed permanently broken. Sophia's memory might never be perfect again, and she might always need to be more careful than most people about who she trusted with the intimate details of her life. But she had learned something valuable during her ordeal. Strength doesn't come from having a perfect mind or a life without challenges. It comes from refusing to let other people's limitations define your possibilities. As she cleaned her brushes that night, Sophia reflected on a letter she'd received the week before from a young artist whose mentor had been stealing and selling her work. "Thank you for showing me that being vulnerable doesn't mean being powerless," the letter had said. "Your story gave me the courage to speak up." The letter was tucked into the frame of her easel, next to a photo Victoria had taken of the recovered paintings arranged in James's gallery. In the photo, dozens of Sophia's works created a riot of color and emotion across the white walls, each piece a testament to the fact that true creativity comes from something too deep and essential to be stolen or destroyed. She looked around the studio one more time before turning off the lights, at the organized chaos of her workspace, at Victoria's neat stack of business files, at the wall where new paintings waited to be born. Her memory of this moment might fade or shift over time, but the feeling would remain. The deep satisfaction of a life reclaimed, a talent protected, and a future rebuilt on foundations of honest trust. Sophia Morrison had learned that some things, art, love, integrity, the bond between sisters, were stronger than lies, more enduring than any attempt to diminish or control them. Her story had become proof that even when someone tries to steal your clarity, your truth remains, waiting patiently for the moment when you're strong enough to reclaim it. And in the morning, she would wake up and paint again, creating something new from the endless well of creativity that no one, no matter how skilled at deception, could ever truly take away. Thank you for listening until the end. If you enjoyed the story, please consider leaving us a like. This helps us reach more people.